It was only a few hundred yards off the interstate. Twice my curiosity had gotten the better of me, and I'd tried to get closer to it. The sheer cliff where they'd cut through for the highway made any approach from the west impossible, so I searched for adjacent roads. After a few hours of wasted effort, it was clear there was no avenue up to the house proper. Studying the latest street maps, I could find nothing that got me anywhere near the hilltop. I didn't know why I was so drawn to the place, but it was always on my mind. A compulsion. I studied surveying maps and asked around the nearest town several miles away, but couldn't find out any more about it. I researched properties for sale and old tax records, all of no avail. There was a history to the house and old records, but everything seemed to end around the 1930s. I ran into a blank at every turn. The more of a challenge it proved, the more stubborn I became. My obstinance was both a blessing and a curse. The place was well off the beaten path in backwoods Virginia. I was only out in the area every couple months or so when working with a rural customer. More often than not, I just drove past, staring up at the mystery, straining to see just a little more, something to assuage my curiosity. Finally, my patience surrendered to my obsession. I planned a day excursion, and one fine morning I parked my car at what I thought was the nearest and most likely access point, sprayed on an extra helping of deep woods off, and started hiking in. It was hard going, no trail to speak of, which surprised me. Places like this were always targets for neighborhood kids to hang out and get in trouble. Perhaps the scarcity of local population combined with the difficulty of access discouraged it. The route couldn't have been much more than half a mile at best, and yet the thick overgrowth and vicious thorns kept me at bay for nearly 2 hours. I fought through, determined, clingy vines grasping at my legs, immense deadfalls abruptly blocking my route, hidden thorny branches shredding my skin, unsurpassable thickets forcing me deeper into the woods. After a few hundred yards, I was exhausted, silently cursing the dark, foreboding woods that sought to deny me my goal. The woods opened up to larger, more setted forest giants that silently observed my implacable progress before closing in again as I reached the top of the hill. When I finally broke free in the open, the man stood before me, magnificent and sad at the same time. It was huge, beyond my expectations, 3 full stories with 2 large chimneys on each end of the house, maybe 15 feet apart. The building was stone, 5 window openings, and on the end facing me, stacked 2 to 1. Now just gaping holes in the side of the building. The front was impressive, with a wide double doorway in the center, bracketed by 2 window openings on each side. On the second and third floors, there had been 5 windows each, now just dark smudges on the ancient facade. The original porch was long gone, but with some effort I climbed up the front into my entrance. I was holding my breath, eager to view the interior for the first time, my mind adrift in the contemplation of the wonders ahead of me. The first sight was a punch in the gut. Decrepit ruin and rot, devastating in its completeness. That was my reward. It was well lit, the light from the window openings flooded it, and daylight streaming down from above. Looking up, I could see the sky through the 3 intervening ceilings and the roof. Portions of floor were still intact, as were many of the joists, pillars, and beams. I carefully maneuvered my way along the walls to see some of what lay hidden from view. Each step was an adventure, the soft, rotted wood eager to pitch me into the darkness below, if I strayed from the safety of the joists. Soot-blackened walls and charred beams told me a fire must have destroyed the place. From the looks of things, it was the worst on the third floor and attic, with the ground floor somehow surviving with at least ruin. Significant damage, but not the hollowed-out shell of the top floors had become. I made it most of the way up the stairs in the second floor before the creaking of the rotted wood underfoot had my heart racing too fast to continue. When a board disintegrated underfoot, compulsion yielded to common sense, and I gave it up as it was too dangerous. I had peeked over the top into the floor space above, but it was difficult to tell where rooms had been. In a few places, hints remained of what might have been walls, but it says debritus, but it says deridus at the same time. It's challenging me in places. But fallen detritus from the floor above made even that a guess at best. The devastation was near complete. Carefully working my way back down, legs trembling, I retreated from the house. My curiosity only further inflamed. From the outside, the place was majestic. The stone looked perfect, the proportions ideal. The outline of a steeply pitched roof and those 4 fantastic chimneys against the sky were breathtaking. I walked around the building, still at a loss for how the exterior walls could look so solid with so little inside to hold them up. There was a 30-yard area surrounding the house where the trees had not yet dared to trespass. The grass and clover intermixed on the peak of the hill where the decrepit mansion now stood. I could only imagine what it must have looked like in its glory. I wondered if it was possible to restore it to that very glory. I knew I wanted to try. It took me 6 months of effort to track down the ownership of the property. It was considered unimproved, the house not even showing up on paperwork. 50-year-old businesses exchange land ownership, their actions hidden behind the corporate veil. Actually contacting the owner proved almost as difficult. The house had become my hobby, taking over much of my free time, occupying my thoughts. I made countless phone calls, mailing in public information requests, spending hours and hours at the local courthouse and records room. Eventually, my stubbornness won out. I found myself in a senior home halfway across the country, nervous to finally meet the person who I believed was the actual owner. I glanced around the room, dizzied by the combination of opulence and decay. The furniture, wallpaper, artwork were so different from the nursing homes I was familiar with. Nothing modular or modern, it spoke of a different age, and a different class of clientele. Now, at the same time, my senses were assaulted with a variety of smells conflicting with each other. Bleach, mildew, urine, dust, and overall a mustiness that was depressing to say the least. The curtains were inexplicably closed, blocking out sunlight, leaving vague shadows in its place. One of the assistants wheeled out an elderly woman in a wheelchair. She looked like she might have been around at the turn of the previous century. Her gray hair, or what was left of it, was carefully combed back. She had makeup on, an elegant dress, and jewelry. She had clearly made herself up for my visit. "Mrs. Madison, I'm Jack Thompson. I hope you don't mind my coming to speak with you." She giggled. The sound seemed out of place coming from her. "Mind? Of course not. It's not every day that a lady has such a handsome young man come to call. Would you like some tea? Ralph would be happy to get us some." "That'd be very nice, please. I'm so glad you've come by. I don't get many visitors these days." "I'm very happy to be here. You're not an easy woman to find, Mrs. Madison." "Beverly, please. Mrs. Madison sounds like my mother-in-law. I shouldn't be that hard to find. I'm afraid I've cooped up here nearly 20 years. "Cooped up? I could understand that feeling. I would want out of that environment given any chance. Would you like to go outside? It's a beautiful day out." "Do you think we could?" "I don't see why not, Beverly. Why don't we have our tea out on the lawn? I'd seen several tables outside and thought it'd be more pleasant to be outdoors, far more pleasant than where I stood." "That would be just divine." I guided her wheelchair out the door, taking the ramp out to the spacious front lawn, and steered her to an open table with some shade. I parked her there, briefly wondering why more people weren't outside on such a gorgeous day. "I'll be right back with our tea," I told her. "Thank you, Jack." Ralph was looking around for us with a serving tray in his hands. "Sorry, Ralph. Mrs. Madison and I will be having our tea outside at one of the tables. I hope that's not a problem." He didn't seem concerned and passed me the tray. I returned to Beverly and set one of the cups before her. She lifted the lid off, matching the small bowl, and using silver tongs, she had added 2 sugar cubes to her cup. I'd never seen sugar cubes before. I was fascinated with her slow, precise movements. Everything about her whispered grace and elegance. I love the spring, don't you? She asked, sipping daintily from her old-fashioned china teacup. Absolutely. Spring and fall are my favorite seasons by far. I'm afraid my spring and fall have passed me by. I'm well into winter by now. A very lovely winter it is, I told her, smiling. I was surprised at my own mild flirting. Something about her set me at ease. You're sweet to say so. It is lonely. I'm surprised. I'd expect half the men in the house to be courting you. Oh, there's still a few, but mostly silly old fools. I'd say the ones who aren't the fools. She smiled. I'd agree with you, but that would be awfully brazen of me, wouldn't it? Beverly seemed to have her wits about her and was quite easy to talk to. We chatted about the weather, and I found out she was a baseball fan, and we argued a little bit about the American League East. She pushed her cup away, raised her head to the sun, basking in it. I'm sure you didn't come out here just to flirt with an old woman. I blushed. Beverly, do you own a piece of property in Virginia? A hillside burned-out home on a piece of rural land not too far from the Chesapeake? She thought about it. I own a few properties, most of them leased out. In Virginia, you say? Yes, the house looks very old, not much left on the inside, but the outside is still quite impressive. I believe that was my Uncle Donald's place. A very sad story. His young wife and infant daughter perished in the fire. He couldn't stand to live there and moved west. He left me the property in his will. That must have been over 40 years ago. I've been fascinated by that old house on the property and would like to try to restore it. Would you consider selling the place? You're not from around here? You live out that way? Yes, ma'am. You've come a long distance to discuss this, haven't you? I've been working for almost a year to find out who owned it and try to buy it, I confessed. Would you want to rebuild it? Honestly, I don't know. It's been on my mind since I caught my first glimpse of it, nagging me incessantly. When I finally hiked my way in to see it, I couldn't help but imagine what it must have looked like in its heyday, and would love to see it restored to its previous glory. I have an image in my mind of what it should look like, and I'd like to take my time rebuilding it and live there. Quite a fascination you've developed. Yes, it is. It consumes me. I'm not rich, but I think I could give you a fair price for the place. She looked at me long and hard. She didn't speak for a couple of minutes. I didn't pressure her to. Perhaps we could come to an agreement, she said. I hope we can. The truth is, I don't need a lot of money. I'm fairly well off, and as you might imagine, my needs are simple, and I don't have a lot of expenses. Before I could answer, she continued, I have a confession, Jack. I'm lonely, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the time we've spent together. As have I, Beverly. As have I. Could you do something for me? Keep me involved in your project. Talk to me. Call me regularly, maybe send me pictures of your progress. I have no family, and the days get longer and longer. I'd love to see what you can do with that old place. If we can come to terms, I'd love to have you involved. I'd be happy to call you as often as you wish and send you weekly pictures of my progress, if any, videos of the place, whatever I could do. When it's done, could you take me out there to see it? Please? She reached out with her small cold hands and placed them over mine. How lonely she must be. Ma'am, I'll fly you out there whenever you want, at my expense. There's no access currently, but once I've cleared a road to the house, I'd love to have you come out to view it as it is now, and see what I can make of it. Her eyes glistened as she looked off into the distance. You won't forget me once I've signed it over, will you? We could guarantee I wouldn't in the contract. I just need your word. Beverly, you have my solemn word. Like you, I have no family. I never knew my parents. I've no wife, no girlfriend, no children. I'm quite alone in this world, and can't think of anybody I'd rather share this adventure with. Her eyes welled up, and tears started to slowly trickle down her cheek. Jack, I'm rather tired. I'd like to go in now. Of course. Disappointed, I rolled her away from the table and wheeled her back into the building. At the threshold, she stopped me. Are you returning east immediately? My schedule's open, I assured her. I'll have my lawyer stop by tomorrow. If you could come by for dinner, perhaps we could conclude our deal. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Thank you very much. Back in my room, I was nervous. We hadn't agreed on the price, and once the lawyers got involved, who knew what would happen? I was so close, I had a hard time getting to sleep that night. In the morning, I felt much calmer. I believed Beverly. I was convinced she wanted this as much as I did. I went out and did a little shopping, prepared to show her how serious I was about keeping her involved. I stopped by the home at 4:30, not certain what time dinner was. I appear to have guessed correctly. She and a distinguished older gentleman were seated at a table waiting for me. Beverly beamed. Jack, I have to tell you, I haven't been this excited in ages. I'd like to introduce you to my friend Jerome. Jerome stood and shook my hand. He had a determined gaze and a firm handshake. Convince me I should approve this. Now, Jerome, Beverly chided. No, Beverly, he's right. He has your best interests in mind. Allow me, if I may. Once again, I explained in detail how I'd first seen the place and come to be enthralled by it. I reviewed my research, my desire, and my place in the world, and he was quiet, letting me go on. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the gift. Beverly, this is a picture frame, and it can show a variety of photos. I turned it on, and she saw the digital images of the house in its current state. I can hook this up to the internet and put it in your room. Then, whenever I have new pictures, I can remotely put them on the picture frame for you to see that same day. She seemed excited by the idea. She was watching the picture frame, and I showed her how she could move the pictures back and forth in order and pause at any one, or leave them in a slideshow mode. I held up my smartphone. This phone took the photos I just showed you. I'll keep it with me at all times on the property, and I promise I'll take plenty of pictures in every step of the way. I'll upload them as soon as I have internet access. Finally, I pulled out another cell phone. This is for you. I programmed my number into it. The bill will come directly to me. You can call me anytime, and I will try to call you every day. I don't want to commit to every day since I'm not sure I can keep that promise, but I'll do my best. Beverly looked over at her lawyer with a big smirk on her face. Jerome? He sighed. Damn it. All right, I'm convinced. Sign here. He pushed the paper towards me. We haven't agreed on a price yet, I said, hesitating. I'm sure you can afford it. He flipped the contract back to the first page and pointed. The sales price was $1. I was flabbergasted. Beverly, that's not fair. Jack, it's just an expense for me. I pay taxes every year on a piece of land I never see and make no money off of. You'll be doing me a favor. Please agree to this. I could feel the tears welling in my eyes. My dream was coming true. I don't know what to say. Say yes and sign the paper. Save your money for the repairs. I suspect they will not be cheap. I looked over at Jerome, who shrugged. She wants to do this. Trust me, there's no stopping it now, and financially it won't hurt her in the least. Sign the contract. I signed the paper and went around to the table and asked if it was okay if I hugged her. She struggled to her feet, leaning heavily on my arm, and let me embrace her. I held her a long time until I could control my emotions. My shoulder was wet when I finally eased her back into her chair. Text message. As I took my seat, she thanked me. I'm the one who should be thanking you. You've made it possible for my 5-year dream to come true. Jack, this is the happiest and most fun I've had in longer than I care to admit. Follow your dream. Just don't forget me. Never, I swear. Jerome interrupted. That's done. How about we have dinner? It's getting late. It was a daunting task ahead of me. I tried to make sure that my work didn't suffer, but I spent every weekend working on my project. My holidays and vacation time were spent laboring on the house. Every day I called Beverly in the morning, reviewing my progress, if any, the day before, and discussing my future plans. Over time, our discussions moved away from the house and encompassed our lives. We talked about my job, my project, and my Spartan life away from the two. Jack, why don't you date? I just don't have time right now. I'm rather focused on my work and the house. It doesn't make me very sociable. BS. You're a handsome young man. You should have a girl. Well, I'd like that very much, and someday I hope I will, but that's in the future. But you dated in the past? I have. That didn't work out so well. I think I'm too intense for most women I meet. The same fixation I have on the house, I tend to have on whatever I'm working on. Go out tonight and relax. Chat up a girl. Buy her a drink. I laughed. Okay, Mom, I'll see if I can't go out for a beer tonight. No promises about the girl. She was quiet. Mom, nobody ever called me that. Oh, I'm sorry. I hope I didn't offend you. Offend me? It's the nicest thing you've ever said. I should be so lucky. Beverly, you're the best thing to happen to me in ages. I can't tell you how happy I am to talk to you every day, and I don't think I knew how lonely I was before you. I heard her sniffle. Enough already. You'll make an old woman cry. Go to work before you're late. On my way, Mom. Don't nag. What else are moms for? That was the end of the first page. I don't know if we want to press on or leave that where it is tonight. Up to you guys.
I'm down for whatever.
I heard
I want more.
Violet wants more. We got votes for more. We got votes for hold off. What do we got here? I need more.
Oh, please, man. I'm about to cry.
That was so sweet. That poor lady.
Wait, you said this is a horror?
It's erotic horror.
Oh no.
So we can press on for a bit. I don't mind.
I'm down for more.
Alrighty.
Please do.
Let me take a drink of water here. Okay. Now the property was huge and 90% covered with old growth trees. The wood seemed ancient, sometimes a little scary, mostly oaks and hickory, some walnut, poplars, and a scattering of other trees broke up in the oak-hickory monopoly. Only the perimeter near the roads and property line was populated with newer, denser growth, creating a natural barrier to the outside world. I found the original entrance to the property by working my way backwards from the house. The original path I'd taken to the building in my early explorations had the newest trees. Something had cleared out the old growth there. Whether it was a fire or logging, I don't know. Smaller trees, dense undergrowth, and innumerable thorn thickets made it almost impassable, as I'd learned. The original road traveled through older massive trees, maybe 50, 60 feet or taller, with diameters of 3 to 4 feet common. Only as you approached the main road did the trees give way to the newer dense woods I'd encountered my first time out. The idea of getting all the permits necessary for building scared the hell out of me. I was immensely relieved when the county inspector came out to visit the property. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy, extremely helpful, and even excited to be involved in the process. It seemed like I got a ton of waivers for restoring a historic property, as long as I didn't do anything to change the exterior. The biggest issue for him was the design of the front porch, the types of windows used, and the look of the roof, as long as I left the stonework intact. He seemed to be on the phone half the time he was with me, calling in questions and each time arguing the minimum amount of oversight. I grew to like and respect Andrew, and assured him I'd keep him in the loop. After weeks of research, I selected a used portable hydraulic sawmill to purchase, and figuring I could use it to cut my own wood and sell it when I was done. Together with a rented Caterpillar and some diesel generators and worksite lighting, I worked from dawn to nearly midnight, no fear of neighbors complaining, not from over a mile away, with the wood serving as a natural sound barrier. I sold my townhouse and moved from downtown to a month-by-month rental at the edge of the suburbs. From there, I had a 40-minute commute to work, but I was only a little more than half an hour from the house. I spent more and more of my time there, building wall supports, replacing large beams, installing new joists, slowly giving the house a new skeleton. I never seemed to have enough time for the house. I moved I moved an inexpensive used trailer onto the property so I no longer had to leave on the weekends. It gained me another 68 hours of work and gave me a place to store my tools out of the weather. I've always been handy with tools. I can thank my second foster parents for that. Still, it seemed every day I was confronted with some new challenge which inevitably required research and experimentation. I didn't mind. My obstinance and willingness to make mistakes usually saw me through. Unfortunately, that meant often doing the same job 2 or 3 times until I got it right. I had some regular laborers I'd hired, along with the occasional specialist. I even found some interested volunteers who were fascinated with the effort. A few expert on old stone houses became my online friends and were exceedingly generous with their advice and connections. The work was progressing, but I was exhausted. The wood we cleared from the 600-yard winding entrance road was a good start, and we cleared most of the trees from the top of the hill back another 20 yards or so, more in the back. Unusual or very large trees I left in place. I liked the look and had a hard time cutting down trees that old. Besides, they were hell to work with. The sawmill was getting heavy use, grinding out board after board of the flooring, decking, and some of the walls. I learned a lot in the process, especially about costs. For the wood to be usable indoors, I had to have it kiln dried, which meant having it hauled almost 40 miles and waiting another 2 weeks or more to get it back. I experimented with air drying some of the wood, which I would use later in the year. A lot of work and plenty of blisters and splinters later, it looked like I had enough wood to build another house or 2 if I so desired. The smaller branches yielded a firewood pile large enough for me into the business. I located some experts to help with cutting the huge beams needed to replace the original ones that hadn't survived. A single huge standing dead white oak provided all I needed. That was a whole new experience, trying to work with beams that were a foot wide and deep and 30 feet long. The assistance I need for that put a dent in my budget. A big one. Everything was expensive, and I had over $80,000 in the work before I could even see much progress. Electricity and phone service didn't look like they were going to be too difficult, but water was a major issue. One more thing I hadn't counted on. It cost $12,000 to get water into my house. The bills kept adding up, and I realized I didn't have enough money to finish the work. I considered a mortgage on the land, then took out a loan on my 401k. I made good money and saved what I could. I had made a tidy profit off my place in the city, a fixer-upper I'd polished. Sorry, I had a knock at the door. I lost my spot. Fuck. Okay.
Sorry.
You're all good. I did much of the restoration work myself, and the experience was turning out to be invaluable. Despite doing as much as I could myself and using available materials, everything was so damn costly. I paid, I didn't have much any other choice. I still talked with Beverly daily, often twice a day or even more often. I realized that after nearly 7 months, I was probably going to have to put much of the work on hold while I slowly built up some funds. It was fall, and I knew that winter would put much of a halt to my work. I hated the idea of anything slowing me down, but my options were dwindling. It had taken me nearly 2 months just to get the walls supported properly so I could do the necessary interior work. I managed to get the roof completed and had replaced the huge interior crossbeams the floors rested upon. Working the upper floors, especially the 3rd floor, was an adventure. The damage up there was extensive, and I seemed to have more mishaps 30 feet in the air than I would have cared for. Maybe it was me, nervous about working up so high. Twice I came close to falling, boards shifting underneath me, or the weight of a beam unbalancing. I lost 2 full days when a central joist shifted badly, falling to the floor below, and I followed, fortunate to avoid serious injury. But after that I was more cautious, putting up temporary plywood sheets over the floor holes. It was time-consuming, but at least I could work without breaking out in a cold sweat every time I looked down. It was not work for the faint of heart. By the end of summer, the floor and ceiling joists were nearing completion. I decided to stop the immediate work, close off the top floors, seal up the windows, and do what I could to make the main floors livable. I wanted to get out of my rental place and move into the house. It would make more money available for the work, and in spite of a 3 to 4 hour round trip commute, I could work on it every evening, doing some interior finish. Some will consider it blasphemous, but I had no interest in restoring the home to its original condition. My research and visiting experts agreed the house would probably be late 18th century, with several changes made to it. One cornerstone had 1791 carved in it, but another said 1803. Either way, the house was ancient, and probably deserved a lot more attention to historical significance than I was interested in giving it. I loved it for what it was, and wanted to make a place I was happy to live in comfort. If that meant not scouring the countryside for period flooring and paneling, that was fine by me. I wasn't rebuilding somebody else's dream house, I was building mine. And I knew exactly what I wanted. With the first floor wiring in, some basic plumbing, and a workable kitchen, I was tapped out. More than $180K invested, and from the outside you could barely tell, except for the new roof and entrance. But the place was livable, mostly. Andrew, my county inspector, had come by, hanging out for a couple of hours, signing off on the first floor wiring and plumbing. He explained that was unusual in itself. But then again, he laughed. There's nothing usual about any of this project. It takes some big cojones to take on something like this on your own. That or just too ignorant to understand the challenge. You understand, he said. You can't live in a house that's partially finished. Of course, I told him. I'm still living in the trailer. He grinned. Just make sure it stays there. I don't need my ass chewed out. Last thing I want, believe me. I appreciate all the help. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I started. He nodded. It's understandable. Not a lot of restoration of 220-year-old mansions going on, you know. It's gorgeous. You did a hell of a job maintaining the exterior. Didn't have to do much. I admit it hard to believe how little damage there was to the outside walls. Only one chimney needs any work. The windows are a pain, I admit. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. If you have any special issues, just let me know. We'll work it out. Don't keep me in the dark. I nodded. Every step of the way, I promise. Hell, I need someone watching over my shoulder. Last thing I need is to screw up big time. I can't afford it. I'll say this. I had never met so many helpful, generous people as I did working on that old house. Andrew was just one of them, but easily the most important. Not only was he helpful, but he was keeping everyone else off my back. I owed him more than one, and once the place was a little more livable, I was determined to have him and his family over for a nice dinner and tour. The windows were in on the first floor and didn't have to worry about heat, with 4 large fireplaces on the main floor and unlimited firewood. A few $100s for a chimney sweep had them cleaned out. I was assured they were usable, but needed a lot of TLC, one in particular. I had put a temporary trapdoor to the second floor in, and I had a spacious 1-floor apartment. With camcorder in hand, I toured the place, commenting on the work done and what remained to be finished, and naming each room. I was proud of the work I'd completed and could see the place finally coming together. Beverly was ridiculously pleased with the video and held regular showings of it in the TV room at her place. My company's fiscal year ended in October, and a week later I received a sizable end-of-year bonus, my largest yet, over $10,000. It allowed me to purchase some additional furnishings and to move forward with a small plan that had been developing in my mind. Beverly? Jack, you're calling late. What's up? I think I'm about done for the year. I'll be doing some interior work on the upper floors, but probably won't get any major improvements accomplished until the spring. That's a shame. You were making such good progress. Everyone here loves the video. I think it's time for you to come out and see what I've done with the place. Would it be okay for me to come out and get you next weekend and let you view it? But do you have the time? It seems you could spend those days working on your house, she said. I'd much rather spend a little time with you, to be honest. I'm worn out from burning the candle at both ends and could use the rest. A friendly face would be nice to have around for a couple of days. Just let me know what you need and I'll set you up a room. She fought my suggestion for a bit, but I knew her heart wasn't in it. She finally agreed to come out, but only if she could pay her own way. You don't have to come get me. I'll have my nurse put me on the plane. If you could just meet me at the airport, I'll be fine. I argued, but she insisted and reminded me that I could pay for her flight when the place was finally finished. I couldn't stand it knowing you spent your money on me when you could be putting in another window or completing a wall. I'll be all right. I'll send you the flight details as soon as I have them worked out. I spent the week sanding in the Hone oak floors and sealing and staining them. I prepared a room for her and another for myself with a bed, drapes, linens, even a dresser and nightstand. I loved how the porch had turned out and used a little of my funds to furnish it with a few rocking chairs and hanging bench swing out from that old movie. A couple of small tables to hold a drink or a book, some planters with fresh wildflowers to give it a homey look, and considered it a job well done. Things were definitely coming together. On the Thursday before I was to pick her up, I took a long weekend and moved out of my rental. I had spent many nights in my trailer, but I was looking forward to my first night inside the house. I'd practically rebuilt from scratch. I had a small blaze going in the fireplace and was relaxing, telling myself I was going to have to do no work for the next 4 days except for whatever problem showed up when I actually moved in. Electricity was available, but I wasn't ready to go through all the inspections it would require to get it turned on, nor the expense. I'd used a diesel generator and an insulated shed out back that provided the minimum electricity I needed, especially for the small RV refrigerator and well pump. For lighting, I used kerosene lamps and had a large propane tank out back for my kitchen stove and an on-demand water heater. I was almost embarrassed to put in some low-power LED light bulbs in the kitchen and bathroom, the new technology feeling so congruent. I relaxed in a comfortable lounger in the living room, sipping on some hot chocolate, fighting off the evening chill. The old girl was still getting used to her new fittings. The wind through the upstairs floors was annoying, and the house was constantly creaking and settling as the wood dried and all the changes slowly blended in. I wasn't used to the sounds of the night, the noise of animals, birds, and insects. I had somehow thought the house would be quiet and lonely, but it seemed alive with noises. And just outside my door were acres and acres of woods that hadn't seen this much change in scores of years. I went to bed that night, exhausted to the bone, but with a huge smile on my face. I was living my dream. How many people can say that? I woke to the sound of my door creaking open, scaring the bejesus out of me. I was certain I had closed it. I got up and looked around, but the front door was locked and bolted and the windows were all shut. I checked the door latch, expecting some shoddy work on my part. I had left the recess misaligned, but it closed firmly. I closed the door again, checking it, and settled back down. Although everything was going well, I was feeling a moment of loneliness. I hadn't dated in over a year and was yearning for a woman's company. I closed my eyes and stroked myself slowly. I pulled back the sheets and let the cool air bathe my body. My hand moved casually, but I found myself getting very excited. Drafts of air seemed to caress me, tantalizing the head of my cock while my hand stroked the shaft. The feelings were all too brief as I came mightily, my essence pooling onto my belly. I opened my eyes and searched for something to clean up with, settling my dirty shirt, before settling back down to sleep. Good thing I got that out of the way. Wouldn't be appropriate behavior with my guests arriving in a couple of days. I told you this was going to be erotic.
Getting good.
What the fuck? That took a 180.
When I woke, the door was open again. What the hell was going on? I was going to have to check on that. I took my first indoor hot shower and was pleasantly surprised at how quickly the water heated up and how crisp the water felt. No sulfur odor, no lack of water pressure. The house smelled wonderful of fresh wood and the fireplace. I walked around, king of my small domain, and made myself a large breakfast, another extravagant treat. I hadn't been eating as well as I should have, and the heavy manual labor had me dropping almost 15 pounds and tightening my belt. In spite of my promise to myself, I found an immediate problem. I hadn't made a ramp up to the entrance. A wide set of steps led up to the front porch, and I spent the morning constructing a removable ramp I set in place over the steps, just in time. I spent a few more moments walking around the house, opening doors, drawing back curtains, and making the place look as open and bright as possible. I cooked myself a big fat hamburger with potato chips, still indulging myself. Afterwards, I neatened up the kitchen, made myself presentable, and headed out of the airport. Over 2 hours later, I was waiting in the terminal for Beverly to be rolled out by the airline attendants. I saw her before she saw me. She was in an airport wheelchair, dressed to the nines, and being pushed by a young woman. As soon as she was past the security area, I rushed to her, gave her a big hug. I felt like I knew her better than anybody else in my life, sharing the last 7 months with her, albeit by long distance. "Jack, you're skinny as a rail, and that tan looks like you just strolled off the beach. Lots of hard outdoor work can do that to a guy. I feel great. Slept like a baby last night in my new house for the first time," I told her proudly. "That's wonderful. I was surprised you waited this long. Jack, this is my nurse Karen. If it's all right by you, she'll be staying with me. She can tend to my needs, knows how I like things, and remembers all that little stuff I can't be bothered with. Like your meds? Speaking of which, it's about that time." The woman turned to me and stretched out a hand, which I shook. "Pleased to meet you, Jack. You certainly have breathed new life into Cranky here." "Cranky? Beverly, she's the sweetest, least cranky person I know. To you, maybe." "Keep it up, Karen, and I'll cut you out of my will," Beverly warned. "Again? Isn't that the 3rd time this month?" "I'll stick this time." The nurse rolled her eyes, giving me a smile. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am. Never happen again, ma'am." Thank you for the bits and ruining story time, right, Fox? "And none of that smarmy lip either, girl. You're the one that's always wanted to see DC. Their easy banter betrayed a close companionship that I found myself jealous of. Then I smiled. If it made her happy, all the better. "Can I drive?" I asked, moving towards the handles of the wheelchair. "Please, I'm begging you," Karen laughed. We headed for the luggage area and waited for their bags to arrive. Her personal wheelchair was delivered, reassembled after the flight, and Karen prepared the pillows on it before helping Beverly into it. I'd traded my Honda in for a used truck. When I'd started all the work, it was a crew cab, and we were able to place the luggage and wheelchair in the rear. Karen got in the back, and I lifted Beverly into the passenger seat. I was surprised how light she was, and wondered if hauling all that lumber around, or if she really was lighter than air. "You can put me in the truck now, Jack, although I certainly don't mind being held by such a handsome young man." I was embarrassed. I'd been standing there holding her and set her into the cab. I was always a little surprised when she called me handsome. I knew better. Striking, maybe, with a large scar down the side of my jawbone, eyes too small and narrow, nose too wide. Wild hair, which I could do nothing with, and pretty much let it do whatever it would. No, not handsome. Still, it was nice to hear it from her. We were already in D.C., so I gave them a short driving tour of the monuments and downtown, pointing out all the famous landmarks and buildings to their contented oohs and ahs. Then we headed south. It was a long drive, so we broke it up, stopping at a Cracker Barrel for dinner. From there, it was less than an hour before I was turning up to my private entrance, no trespassing signs displayed boldly. "So this is your new road?" Beverly asked as we bounced our way up the hill. "It needs some work, but paving it will probably be the last thing I get around to, if I can help it. We'll be on it for a while, almost half a mile, and my initial quotes are over $30K to get it done." "Would gravel work?" Karen asked from the back. "Yeah, but it might be an alternative if winter proves too much. Still pretty pricey, and then the whole expense is lost when I finally get around to paving it." "Awfully secluded out here," she said, looking at the encroaching trees. The canopy was dense, letting little light through. "Nearest neighbor's about a mile up the road. I've only met a couple of them. Nothing but farmland across the way. The nearest town is about 8 miles. We drove the last bit in quiet before the road opened up, crested the hill, and the house came into view. "It's magnificent!" Beverly exclaimed. "It's huge," Karen chimed in afterwards. I pulled up in front, and we unloaded the wheelchair and escorted Beverly into the house for the first time. "It's beautiful," she said softly, looking around. It was dusk, and we only had a few minutes of daylight left. I set about lighting the kerosene lamps and getting the fireplaces going. The library and sitting room were our makeshift bedrooms, and each had its own fireplace. The huge living area hosted another one, as did the dining room. Only the kitchen at the back of the house was left without, with fires cracking and popping in all 4 rooms. I finally had time for my guests. Karen had brought in the bags and settled Beverly in the front living room fireplace where she could watch our actions while staying warm. "Your pictures didn't do the place justice," Beverly told me when I finally settled into my lounge chair near her. "That's why you had to see it in person. Are you happy with how it's going?" "Beyond happy. I'm just aggravated it's taking so long. I imagine it'll be a couple of years before I'm done with this place. Of course, a house like this one will never really be done." Karen was preparing tea in my kitchen, making herself at home. For the first time, I wondered what it would be like to share this place with a woman. Someone, hopefully, that loved the place as much as I did. "You've done an amazing job here. It must have been a lot of hard work. The woodwork alone must have been exorbitant," Karen said. "All the wood's from the property. Mostly hardwoods. I know a heck of a lot more about trees and wood than I ever thought I'd have to. Come spring, I may thin out some of the woods and sell the trees off to a lumber mill. I may even make enough to pave that road, who knows?" "How much land is it?" Karen asked. "Nearly 500 acres, over a mile of road frontage and well over half a mile deep. We've even gotten a creek on it, but I haven't been down there yet." Beverly had been quiet, but seemed to wake up a bit. "You're doing a wonderful thing here, Jack. The place seems so sad, so forlorn, and you've managed to breathe life back into it. It was a shame for us to let it go so. You've been here then?" And that's the end of chapter 2 there.
Oh, that's intense.
Only fair I, save some for next Sunday, I suppose.
I'm a little scared, to be honest.
Scared?
I'm confused. Are we gonna get grandma fucking or nurse fucking?
Like Sex in the Woods, it's fucking intense.
Well, you're just gonna have to wait and find out.
Beverly is such a sweet lady.
That she
He's
is.
a cougar.
Possibly.
Meantime, it's time for me to go to bed.
Thank you for the reading, Craig. It was wonderful.
Ain't no thing.